Italy spent 60 years and 20 battleships building the most powerful fleet in the Mediterranean, then spent both world wars keeping every one of them safely in port. What follows is the full record of a navy that built for a war it never quite managed to fight. Italy commissioned Caio Duilio in 1880 as the foundation of a modern Regia Marina, displacing 11,100 tons and armed with four 450mm Armstrong guns, the largest naval guns then afloat. She carried no conventional armor belt, relying on cellular watertight compartments instead. Competing navies spent the next decade redesigning their own capital ships in direct response to her layout. The guns were never fired at an enemy vessel. History recorded Caio Duilio as the ship that reshaped naval architecture. The Italian fleet remembered her as the ship that never fought. Enrico Dandolo entered service in 1882 as the second Duilio-class ship, built to the same unconventional Benedetto Brin design as her sister. She displaced 11,140 tons, carried four 450mm guns, and reached 15 knots on trials. In service, the loading cycle for the main guns extended so far beyond practical combat norms that their tactical utility in any realistic engagement was negligible. The designers built a functional weapons platform. The crew operated a monument. Italia entered service in 1885 as the largest warship in the world, a title the Regia Marina publicized widely across European naval circles, displacing 15,600 tons at full load, reaching 18 knots, and carrying four 431mm guns on a central citadel with no armor belt at all. She was designer Benedetto Brin's argument that side protection was an engineering error. Foreign navies spent years examining her layout. None adopted the approach. It was built to prove armor was unnecessary. It proved only that the question remained entirely open. Lepanto entered service in 1887 as the second Italia-class battleship, near identical in concept to her sister, displacing 15,900 tons at full load, armed with four 431mm guns, and reaching 17 knots. She was designed to operate alongside Italia as a paired fleet asset. Neither ship was ever tested under fire. The cellular protection theory that defined the entire class was retired along with the ships themselves. 2 built, 0 tested in combat. The question the design was built to answer died unanswered. Re Umberto entered service in 1893 as lead ship of a class intended to modernize the Regia Marina's battle line, displacing 14,700 tons, armed with four 343mm guns, and rated at nearly 20 knots. She was the fastest pre-dreadnought in Italian service. Her class was approved over rival proposals that argued for heavier protection. She served through the First World War in administrative duties and coastal patrol. They ordered a frontline fleet combatant. They got the world's fastest elderly flagship. Regia Marina entered service in 1904 as evidence that Italian battleship design had moved past the experimental era, displacing 14,500 tons, armed with four 305mm guns, and reaching 18.6 knots. She represented a return to conventional side armor after the cellular experiments of the previous decade. On the 11th of December, 1916, she struck 2 German mines off Valona, Albania, and sank within minutes. 674 men were lost. On paper, Italian design had finally matured. In practice, a German minefield made that irrelevant. Benedetto Brin entered service in 1905, named for the naval architect who had defined Italian battleship design for 2 decades, displacing 14,700 tons, armed with four 305mm guns, and reaching 19.7 knots. She was the most capable pre-dreadnought Italy had yet produced. On the 27th of September, 1915, an internal explosion tore through the ship at Brindisi. 454 men died. The subsequent inquiry found evidence of sabotage. Benedetto Brin solved Italian battleship performance. She created the problem of Italian harbor security. Regina Elena entered service in 1907 as lead ship of a class designed to fight alongside the new dreadnoughts then being built across Europe, displacing 12,600 tons, armed with two 305mm and 12 203mm guns, and reaching 22 knots. She was the fastest pre-dreadnought in Italian service. By her completion, the dreadnought had already rendered the class obsolete. The Italian Navy wanted a fleet vanguard. The dreadnought era had already moved on. Napoli entered service in 1908 as the fourth and final ship of the Regina Elena class, displacing 12,600 tons, armed with two 305mm guns and reaching 21 knots. She was operationally identical to her three sisters. All four served through the First World War in secondary duties: patrol, convoy screening, naval reviews, without engaging an enemy capital ship. History recorded the class as Italy's final pre-dreadnought generation. The crews recorded 4 years of waiting for a decisive engagement that never came. Dante Alighieri entered service in 1913 as Italy's first dreadnought, marking the Regia Marina's entry into the industrial age of naval warfare. Displacing 19,500 tons, carrying 12 305mm guns in 4 centerline triple turrets, the first battleship in history to mount all main armament in this arrangement, and reaching 23 knots, she was a landmark in naval history that every major power subsequently studied. She served through the First World War without engaging an enemy fleet. The ship changed naval gun architecture. The Navy never gave it a target. Conte di Cavour entered service in 1915 with 13 305mm guns, then was rebuilt in the 1930s into a 29,000-ton, 28-knot ship with 10 new 320mm guns at a cost equivalent to constructing an entirely new battleship. On the 11th of November, 1940, Fleet Air Arm Swordfish aircraft from His Majesty's ship Illustrious attacked the Italian fleet at Taranto. Conte di Cavour was struck by a single torpedo and settled on the harbor floor. It was designed to anchor Italian naval power. It is remembered for settling to the bottom of Taranto. Giulio Cesare entered service in 1914, was fully rebuilt in the 1930s, and survived the Taranto attack in 1940 with repairable damage. She surrendered with the Italian fleet in September 1943 and was formally transferred to the Soviet Navy in February 1949 as Novorossiysk. On the 29th of October 1955, an explosion beneath her hull in Sevastopol harbor sent her to the bottom. 608 men died. 1 built, 1 transferred to a former enemy navy, the only Italian battleship to sink in a Cold War port. Leonardo da Vinci entered service in 1914 as the third Conte di Cavour class battleship, displacing 23,800 tons and armed with 13 305mm guns capable of 22 knots. On the 2nd of August, 1916, an explosion in the forward magazine tore through the ship while she lay at her moorings in Taranto harbor. 248 men died. The ship capsized. The inquiry pointed to Austrian sabotage. She was raised 3 years later and scrapped without being repaired. They ordered a warship. They received confirmation that Italian harbors were not secure. The second ship to bear the name Caio Duilio entered service in 1915 as one of 2 Andrea Doria-class battleships, displacing 23,200 tons and carrying 13 305mm guns. She was fully rebuilt in the 1930s to 26,500 tons and 27 knots. She survived the war and continued in service until the early 1950s. On paper, a modernized and capable fleet unit. In practice, one of the last capital ships Italy would ever commission. Andrea Doria entered service in 1916 as the second ship of her class, displacing 22,900 tons and carrying 13 305mm guns. She was rebuilt in the 1930s with improved speed and a revised main battery of 10 320mm guns. She survived Taranto, the armistice of September 1943, and continued serving the post-war Italian Navy until 1956. The rebuilt Andrea Doria solved Italy's battleship obsolescence problem. She outlasted every enemy she had been designed to engage. Francesco Caracciolo was laid down in 1914 as the lead ship of a four-vessel super-dreadnought class, designed to displace 34,000 tons, carry 8 381mm guns, and reach 28 knots, specifications that would have made her the most powerful battleship in the Mediterranean. Construction halted in 1915 when Italy entered the war. The hull sat unfinished until 1920, then was sold for scrap. The Italian Navy wanted a super-dreadnought. The First World War had other plans. Littorio entered service in May 1940 as the most powerful warship Italy had ever built, displacing 45,700 tons at full load, armed with 9 381mm guns, and capable of 30 knots. She was among the most capable battleships afloat in any navy. 6 months after commissioning, 3 Fleet Air-armed torpedoes struck her at Taranto, and she settled on the harbor floor. She was raised, repaired, and renamed Italia after Mussolini's fall in 1943. History remembered Littorio as Italy's greatest battleship. The Regia Marina remembered Taranto. Vittorio Veneto entered service in April 1940 as the second Littorio-class battleship, sharing the same 45,000-ton displacement, 9 381mm guns, and 30-knot speed as her sister. She was torpedoed at the Battle of Cape Matapon in March 1941, made port with 4,000 tons of floodwater aboard, was repaired, then torpedoed again by a British submarine in December 1941, repaired once more, and ultimately surrendered intact at the armistice of September 1943. The specification sheet promised Mediterranean dominance. The Mediterranean answered with torpedoes. Roma entered service in June 1942 as the third Littorio-class battleship, displacing 45,200 tons and carrying 9 381mm guns. She was operational for 14 months. On the 9th of September 1943, while leading the Italian fleet toward Malta to surrender to the Allies, German aircraft struck her twice with Fritz X radio-controlled glide bombs. The forward magazine detonated. 1,393 men died. It was designed to project Italian naval power. It is remembered as the battleship that was sunk while sailing to surrender. Umberto was laid down in May 1938 as the fourth and final Littorio-class battleship. By Italy's armistice in September 1943, she was approximately 80% structurally complete, an estimated 43,000 tons of unfinished warship, but sat at Trieste without a functioning propulsion system. German forces seized the hull. Allied aircraft used her as a bombing target and sank her on the 20th of February, 1945. 1 laid down, 0 commissioned. The math tells the rest.